enhancing communication in the digital age. We have Rory Farka and Andrew Mertens. And with everyone's permission, I am going to read a short introduction that I had saved here on my screen, but somehow I managed to to lose it because I sometimes do that. But I will ask everyone before anything else to go, if they're not subscribed, to go to howaboutsmarketing.com and subscribe to my newsletter. That's the newsletter that you want to be subscribed to become a better marketer, a better person, and a better communicator. Google.com. And with everyone's permission, I'd like to introduce right now Rory. Rory is an accomplished leader with over 30 years of information technology and service delivery experience in the financial service, outsourcing, and transportation sector. He has worked in numerous iconic Canadian corporations, including CP Rail, BMO, Aon, TELUS, and most recently served as Associate Vice President, Technology Solutions at the TD Bank. Rory has a proven reputation for resolving difficult situations under adverse conditions, utilizing effective problem-solving and communication techniques to achieve success. I can hardly wait for your presentation, Rory. But before we dive right in, I would like to introduce Andrew. Andrew is an accomplished IT leader with over 25 years of experience in global information technology and project delivery experience, operating in multiple senior management roles. And he has actively involved in Toastmasters for 12 years, taking a progressively more senior leadership role, and was the district director for the 2022-2023 Toastmaster year that just ended on June 30th. Responsible for over 100 clubs and 2,000 active members in downtown and midtown Toronto, along with his team. And here I'm proud to say I was part of Andrew's team. I've been working closely with Andrew for the past year, and I'm so excited about this upcoming webinar. I can't tell how excited I am. I already lost my words. Andrew is an experienced speaker, speech mentor, workshop presenter, and enjoys helping others grow and gain confidence in their communication. Before I pass along the virtual microphone to our guest speakers, I'd like to say that this webinar is powered by Session. Session is a app that we are doing this on. It's available at session.us, and right now it has a lifetime deal on AppSumo. I'll be dropping the link for more information. Also, this series are in partnership with Aspiration Marketing, and that's why you see this a fourth gentleman on the screen, Joaquin. Joaquin, would you care to introduce yourself and say who do you do?
Thanks, Emanuel. Happy to. Yeah, also Toronto-based digital marketing agency, full-service marketing agency. We work on the content marketing side, SEO, and web design side, together with PPC and SEO. We're partnering with Emanuel. So same pitch as Emanuel did before. If there's anything where people are interested, contact Emanuel and he'll route you the right way.
Thank you so much. Joaquin has been part of this series, and you will be seeing more and more of us. That being said, we're already just a little bit late, but I've talked to the executive producer of the show, and he said he's okay if we go over the past time. Without further ado, I'll give it back to you, Andrew and Rory.
Thank you very much, Emanuel. Thank you for that warm introduction. And I do recommend Sessions, by the way, just because I had some difficulty getting in. Don't let that deter you. Rory and I actually spent last night in Sessions and love the functionality. We're just going through a bit of a learning curve. But Emanuel, what I have noticed is that sharing is disabled. So while I do my introduction, if you can enable sharing for me, that would be really helpful because we do have a slide deck to go through. So while you look at that, I'll begin the introduction. Is that okay, Emanuel? Yeah. Okay. Enhancing communication in the digital age, breaking through the noise. So first, right off the bat, I want to emphasize 2 points. So the first one is, this is a huge topic. Days can be spent on learning how to enhance communication, how to become an effective communicator. This evening, Rory and I are going to touch upon one small aspect. That's all we have time for. One small aspect that we think is pivotal and foundational when it comes to effective communication. And if this doesn't happen, then that communication, that effective communication, will not follow. So that's the first point. The second point is that we have an amazing array of communication channels and media that exist today. In fact, this meeting is an example of it. Me and Toastmasters, I'm familiar with Teams, I'm familiar with Zoom. We're now using a new one called Sessions. But all these channels exist. But just because they exist doesn't mean that effective communication is happening. So again, tonight, Rory and I, we're going to be teaching or sharing with you a simple technique that I know will make an immediate difference in terms of your own communication. So thank you for joining. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to what's going to follow. And I'm just going to wait on Emanuel's thumbs up to say, hey, sharing is...
Sharing is enabled for speakers and host. You should be fine.
Yeah, it says sharing is disabled for me.
Oh.
Rory, is it okay for you? Now, we do have a backup because Emanuel does have the deck, so he could always be sharing for us if we can't get it ourselves.
No, I've got sharing disabled as well, Andrew.
Oh, okay. It just came online there, Emanuel.
Sorry?
It just became enabled. So thank you. I don't know what you did. Oh, there was a delay in terms of it being enabled, but
Magic dust. Magic sharing dust.
Okay, so let's get this show on the road. You can see that, I assume.
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. I cannot see anybody, so I've now lost access to the audience. But Rory's going to be my chat monitor. So when I'm asking a question, and I'm hoping we love interactive sessions, so I'm hoping this will be as interactive as possible. So when you put something in the chat, Rory's going to read it out to me and interrupt me at an appropriate point. So we have tonight's webinar, Enhancing Communication Digital Age. What Rory and I called, and this is a small aspect, small but pivotal, but we're going to talk about the trust factor. So our webinar tonight is called the trust factor. Now, before we go into what this means, I do want to, and this is almost like the third critical point, what do we mean by communication? What is the definition of communication? And this is what I'm going to be asking you. This is the interactive part. If you could type into chat what communication means to you, we'll come up with a definition that we can move forward with.
Andrew, sorry for interruption, but
yes.
Is everyone still caught on the first slide with 3 pictures on it?
Okay, that's a good question.
Yes.
I've moved on.
Yeah, I know you did because I know what the slides look like. All that I see is the slide 1. I'll say that.
Let me stop sharing. And let me reshare. And what do you see now?
Communication slide.
Okay.
A blank communication slide.
Yes. Yes, we're going to get into the definition. If I happen to go scroll backwards, do you see anything?
Yes.
The trust
you see the trust factor? Okay.
Yes.
Can't tell you why I got stuck on the first slide. I will not go back to the first slide, so we won't get stuck there again. I'll just move forward from here. So you can see the communication again?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So if you can type into chat what communication means to you, I'd love to hear what your definition is. What are some of the aspects that would facilitate effective communication from your perspective? And Rory, if you could read out any, the comments. Now, I'm assuming, do people have access to chat?
I see one chat. One individual said communication is getting the message right. I also have exchanging information clearly.
Excellent. Excellent. In fact, I like that exchange bit because communication, I agree, it's an exchange. Now, some people might say, there's one-way communication, but tonight we want to talk about two-way communication. We want to talk about an exchange. So absolutely. Any other comments coming through, Rory?
No, we have the two and only the two so far.
Okay, so an exchange, I'm going to say it's an exchange of knowledge. That could be facts, it could be interesting information that you've read about, you want to impart it to somebody, you want to get into a conversation. Ideas, something that you've read and it's prompted an idea, so you want to share that idea. And insight. Insight's always really important because you've had an epiphany or a eureka moment and you want to share that with somebody. But again, it's an exchange. It's a dialogue between two people. So communication, exchange of knowledge, ideas, and insight. I'm going to add one more critical word, and you'll see that coming up in blue, a respectful exchange. And why I've put that there is that when it comes to communication, we never want to close anybody down. We don't want to say something that's going to trigger or cause them to become defensive and essentially become quiet, or they're no longer listening. We want it to be respectful in that we want to have that two-way dialogue. We want people to be communicating, again, the facts, the knowledge, the information they've read, ideas they've come across, any insights that they've gleaned. So here's the definition that we're going to be working with tonight. Yeah, sorry, Rory?
Sorry, Andrew, we did have a third comment coming through, and yep. The comment is connecting with others.
Excellent. Excellent. And I like that word connect. And you're going to see why I like that word connect shortly. So communication, a respectful exchange of knowledge, insights, and ideas and insight. There's a flow to communication. So communication equals, and the first one is trust. So the title was the trust factor. So in order for communication to take place effectively, there's a foundational element, and that's the trust. And then, this is why I like the word connect, it is a connection. It's a connection between people. So that the connection needs to take place. It needs to take place in an impactful way. So when you have trust, when you have connection, then you're going to see change. Because communication often leads to change, because when we want to communicate, there's a message that we want to impart, and we're hoping that that message will make a difference to somebody, that somebody will hear it. It could lead to a call of action or to some inspiration. We're hoping to influence people in a way that would benefit perhaps a cause that we're interested in. So trust, connect, and change. And if we look at that from a pictorial perspective, you start with the foundation of trust. And in order for trust to be present, the information needs to be true, it needs to be necessary, and it needs to be kind. Now, I'm just going to put those words, single words, and we'll delve more into that a little bit later on in a subsequent slide. But the trust is the foundation, and then you have the connection. So the connection, to me, are pillars. And it's through connection that we understand, who are we connecting with? What are we going to connect about? Why are we connecting? And how are we connecting? And the how is interesting as well, because this gets into the delivery mechanisms. And in Toastmasters, we talk a lot about delivery mechanisms. We talk about vocal variety, body language, the effective use of a pause, for instance. All of that leads to an effective delivery, which helps us to be more impactful when we want to get a message across. So that's the connect. And then we get into the change. So we have it all leading through influence up into change. And the change can be as simple as, because communication could be educational. So where there's a change in that the person that we're communicating with now has more information that they had to begin with, and they know more about something. It could be entertaining. We've made them laugh. There's been a change. So a stand-up comedian wants to be able to make people laugh. So there's been a change. It can be inspirational, as I was mentioned before. It could be a call of action. So these are all different things or different aspects, different perspectives when we come to communication. But this is a pictorial of the communication flow. I want to take a few seconds for you to read this. So I'm going to be quiet. Have a read of this, and we'll get back to this, because this is all around the words that we say when we communicate. The words of the tongue should have three gatekeepers. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? an Arabian proverb, one of my favorite proverbs. This has been very impactful to me, this quote. And these are 3 questions I always keep in the back of my mind whenever I'm communicating. And you'll see those words that were part of the foundation of trust: true, necessary, and kind. And what we're going to be doing this evening is we're going to be going through each of these questions, because it's these questions and what we say that's going to establish that trust. It's going to establish and maintain that trust. And this is why we're calling the webinar the trust factor. So let's have a look at each of these in turn. Is it true? May seem fairly straightforward, simple, perhaps common sense. But it's really, really important that when we communicate with people, that we're communicating facts. We're communicating things that have taken place. We're communicating things that have happened. Within Toastmasters, it's a public speaking organization. It's something that we really emphasize. I mean, you can't talk about things that didn't happen, that you didn't hear, that you didn't feel, etc. It has to be true. So I'm saying that from a generic perspective. But Rory is going to be talking about this from a business perspective, because we have our day jobs, we have our careers, and it's really important within the corporate environment that when we communicate within that environment, and often we're communicating to senior management, that it definitely needs to be true. So Rory, I'm going to turn this over to you, and let's hear some interesting examples.
Thanks, Andrew, and good evening, everyone. In business, I cannot overstress the importance of a message being true. Absolutely required to build and maintain trust. I'd like to tell you about a couple learning moments for me. Early in my career, I was in a meeting and my business colleague was presenting to our CIO. And about a third of the way through his presentation, he was making a point. The CIO stopped him and questioned the point a bit. And unfortunately for my colleague, the point was wrong. So the CIO piped up and said, well, that point was wrong. Why should I believe any other point you're going to make? My colleague had lost our CIO's trust. Well, several months later, as luck would have it, it was my turn to present to our CIO in front of my peers. He was asking me questions. I was answering the questions. I thought to myself, this is going very well. On about the 5th question, I again answered the same way I had been answering, with what I think it, and he stopped me mid-sentence. My CIO stopped me. He sighed and said, respectfully, Rory, I do not care what you think. Both of these experiences are a wee bit harsh, but very important lessons to learn early in my career. Simply put, our CIO expected information that was fact-based. That's where my colleague fell down. He unfortunately did not have all the facts right. And the CIO is not looking for opinions or guesses. And that's where I fell down early, because I was beginning my sentences, well, what I think, sir, is. And that's why he shut me down. So at the end of the day, the CIO and anyone in business, they want to hear a message that is true.
Great examples, Rory. And I like the first one. And you're absolutely right. I mean, if you get caught out in terms of presenting something that is questionable, not true, then I can certainly see why the CIO would say, yeah, why would I believe anything else? Because you have lost the trust there. But I like your second point as well. And I think it's fair to say that, talk factually unless you're asked for your opinion. And then you could say, well, what I think is, and then you can say why you think that. So I really like the 2 examples. And in fact, if I take the second example, how would you summarize that? And I always like succinct phrases or succinct sentences. I always find them easier to remember.
Well, at the end of the day, if you look at what people really want to hear when you're talking about something that is true, they want to hear facts. They did not ask, as you pointed out, Andrew, they did not ask what do you think, what's your opinion, take a guess. So at the end of the day, I would summarize this as never guess.
Voila. Excellent summary. Never guess. So thank you for sharing that, Rory.
You're welcome.
Well, let's move over to the second question. Is it necessary? Now, this is a really important one as well, because we can say a lot of words when we're communicating. And sometimes we're saying things that, is it absolutely necessary? Is it something that the speaker, or not the speaker, but the person that you're communicating with, is it actionable? Can they do something with that information? Because if we say something that they can't do anything with, then have we wasted their time potentially? Have we wasted our time? Because we could have been saying something else more meaningful. So when it comes to communication, depending on what your purpose is, what message you're trying to impart, it's really important that when we put that content together, when we put those words together, that every aspect of it is necessary. And if we're talking to somebody, let's say somebody's asked us for feedback, and we're conveying some information to them, the feedback has to be something that they can then work with and action. Because if we say something that, okay, that's great, well, it's not great feedback, but that's feedback that I can't do anything with. And I'll give you a really blunt example. So for instance, some people have said to me, hey, Andrew, you have an accent, I can't understand you. It'd be great if you got rid of your accent. Oh, well, I can't, it's my accent. So that's not going to be helpful, that's not actionable. So there's no point in that person saying that. Now, what they could say is, here's some techniques in terms of, Andrew, slow down, enunciate more, because that gives people a chance to catch up, because you do have a bit of an accent. And when you slow down, then people's brains are going to be able to catch up and understand what you're saying. That's useful information. So is it necessary is a really important aspect of when we put our content together. And going back to the business world, Rory, I'm sure you've got some examples as well.
Thanks again, Andrew. So you're leveraging your point about absolutely necessary information. You're absolutely correct. In the business world, it's critical to deliver the right information. In business, an individual may be listening for your information to take an action. And depending on the level of the individual in the organization, this individual may have the ability to impact people, a team, a client, or even the company's results based on the information you provide. So in most cases in business, people are looking for all the information they need to take an action. They're typically looking to make a decision. Hence why you're providing them information and recommendations. So the message has to be necessary. You have to ensure your message is comprehensive. It has to include all the salient facts and be concise. The message has to be as short as possible. It cannot have all these extra words, all these extra adjectives, which actually will distract the listener from hearing the true message you want to deliver. A good indicator of missing the mark here is a listener who begins to ask you more questions or even more questions. That's likely means that your message is not comprehensive. It's not including all the information that listener needs to hear. Or the listener may become distracted. He may pick up his cell phone and start checking their email. That's a good indication that maybe you're not being as concise as you should be. You have too many words. You're going down a garden path that the individual does not even want to hear. So a good strategy to form a good message is, and as a lot of us have heard, is the elevator pitch technique. Pretend you just got on an elevator on the 10th floor, and you have from that point to the time that the elevator gets to the second floor to deliver your message. You need to craft a fact-based message that you can deliver in 8 floors. That's about 30 seconds to ensure that the person listening gets all the necessary information they need. I learned this lesson when I was preparing a justification for replacing a client's application. It would have taken me an 800-floor elevator ride to deliver the message that I had crafted. I had so many words. I had justification layered on justification. Thank God. But before that, I went to talk to the client, that I sat down with my manager, and we discussed it, and he helped formulate the message into a clear, salient points. It actually boiled itself down to 3 key points that help sell the message. At the end of the day, the client's application was old, had old technology, didn't support their current business, and it wasn't flexible to support any of their future needs. Crafting a message that's comprehensive in as few words as possible takes a lot of practice.
It absolutely does. And I think you said made some really interesting points there. And in fact, breaking through the noise. When you have too many unnecessary words, there's too much noise. and the recipient can lose track of, what are you trying to tell me? And particularly when it comes to senior management, for instance, they may suddenly get distracted and they don't hear the pertinent information that they really need to make the decision. I mean, you mentioned, they have to take action. Often we're in meetings where the decisions can be made. The decision makers are there and they need the information. And if you say something that's unnecessary, it could take them down even a garden path or a rabbit hole that, no, I didn't mean to send you that way. It's irrelevant. It's not necessary. So I thought that was really interesting. Another thing I thought was interesting that you mentioned, if you start getting asked lots of questions. I always remember that when I was going before a senior leadership team, I would try to put my content in such a way that no questions were asked. Because if there were no questions, then I felt that I did my job properly and that I gave them all the pertinent information. They had everything that they needed, and they didn't have to come back to me for questions. I remember working for a company where we had a call center, and the senior executive said, any question you get to the call center is a failure somewhere. Your call center should be quiet because all the information has been provided in an understandable way, and all the necessary information has been provided. So, Rory, if you had to summarize one of the key aspects of what you just said, how would you summarize that?
Well, in many times when I've had some of my team craft messages and all that, I would look at the message and I would say, "This is great. That all the information I need to hear is in this message. Go away and write it with fewer words." So the phrase I started coining is less is more.
Perfect. And there we have it. Less is more.
Thank you very much
for that. Yeah, I mean, I had to type really quickly there to get the slide up there. Excellent. Let's move on to the third question. And this is, all the questions are equally important. I mean, it has to be true, the information, it has to be the necessary information, nothing beyond that. But is it kind? This is where you can really close somebody down. So depending on how you phrase something, how you put something together, the words that you use, the tone that you have, you never want to close or make somebody defensive, because as soon as somebody becomes defensive when you're communicating, they're essentially no longer listening. Their mind has gone elsewhere, and it doesn't matter how important it is or what other important items that you want to convey, is not being heard. So is it kind is absolutely essential. And you think about today's world, and you think about some of our, some of the headliners in the news, and you think about the things that they say. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we lived in a world where everybody was kind, where everything that was said was kind? Because then you can really get into that respectful. I used the word respectful before, a respectful exchange. You're not closing people down. They feel listened to, they feel important, they feel valuable, and you get a really good dialogue. Again, Roy, I'm sure that you've got some examples out there in the business world that you'd love to share.
I definitely do, Andrew. And as you already pointed out, at the end of the day, it's extremely important that the receiver of the message is receptive to hear the message so that they can process it. To me, delivering a message in a professional and kind manner means following a couple core principles. The ones I follow is directness and respect. An example of how I applied this strategy. Several years back, I took over a technology team. One of their projects was budgeted about $6 million. And during the handover meeting with the client, my predecessor advised the client for the very first time, unfortunately, that this $6 million project was running $100,000 over budget. Now, of course, the client flinched, was a little upset. Internally, I'm thinking, well, that's not too bad. That's 2% over budget. But of course, after the meeting, I wanted to do my own digging. So I did a complete deep dive on the project, how it's going, amount to be spent, et cetera, et cetera. And unfortunately, I determined the project was actually tracking 1.1 million over budget. Well, that's 20%, and that's a significant overage. So I had to decide how was I going to communicate this even worse message in the kindest way possible. So I went back to my core principles, directness. So therefore, you know what? Let's make sure we deliver it as soon as possible and as quickly as possible. I wanted to be respectful, of course. So I wanted to deliver without making excuses, without blaming people. And of course, as we pointed out, and when we talked about a message being true, we want to make sure we were sticking to the facts. What I also decided to do was to make the message as palatable as possible during the delivery. So I decided to use humor. So I came up with the following one-liner when opening up the meeting with a senior client a couple of days later. I said, I've got very good news. The project is not 100,000 over budget. I've got some very bad news. The project is 1.1 million over budget. Well, I definitely got their attention in kind, direct, and respectful way, but enabled us to quickly get over that and start talking about the details of why, and start looking forward instead of looking backwards.
That's excellent, Rory, and I love that example. And some of the key words that you're using there, I mean, you have to keep people receptive. You want them to be taking in what it is that you're saying. And I think using humor is a wonderful technique. It can be self-deprecating. It can as the way that you used it. Hey, good news, bad news. But I think it doesn't make the situation or the atmosphere as tense as it could be. It sort of lightens it up a bit, but as you say, in a respectful way, so that the information is probably more easily absorbed. Because they're thinking, hey, it's not the 1,100,000. It's but then you come in with a zinger. So yeah, great example. So going as we did before, how would you summarize one of the salient points that you're making, from one of your examples there?
Well, if I was to draw, a circle around all the points that you were making and the message I delivered in the example that happened to me in my life, at the end of the day, you have to make sure that the person that you're talking to, while you're delivering the message, keeps listening. So the phrase I've also used is make sure you keep them listening through your entire message.
Excellent.
Thanks.
No, absolutely. Yeah, we have to. That's the whole idea around communication, is that both of us. I'm listening, and the people or the person I'm speaking to continues to listen as well. So let's summarize what we've just been through, and this is emphasizing the fact that trust is the foundation. We won't have time tonight to talk about connection. I mean, that's a whole nother huge topic. The trust, you have to have trust to begin with, to establish, and then obviously to maintain that foundation. So we talked about the question, is it true? And we translated that from a business perspective into never guess. We talked about, is it necessary? Again, we took one of the points from Rory's examples and we said, well, less is more. And absolutely. And then the last bit that we've just talked about, is it kind, and keep them listening. And when we keep these questions at the back of our minds, when we put together content, when we are communicating, then this is going to establish and maintain trust. It can take a long time to establish that trust. We can lose it very, very quickly. So we have to have these questions always at the back of our mind to ensure that we maintain that trust. Because once you've got that trust, then yeah, it's going to lead to absolutely effective communication. So I want to finish off, or we want to finish off, Rory and I, with another quote. So let me just give you a few seconds to read this. Communication is the lifeline of any relationship. Elizabeth Bergeret, she's a writer, and we didn't use relationship within the definition of communication, but absolutely. It is the lifeline. If you want to have strong relationships, strong, robust relationships, whether it's personal, whether it's family, friends, whether it's colleagues and professional, communication is the lifeline. And with communication, but for that to be effective, we talked about the trust, the connection, the change, but you have to start off with the trust. That's the foundational element of any effective communication. And yes, we have a plethora of different communication channels today and media, but they're just simply tools. That's all they are. They're channels, they're media, they're tools. We have to understand how to effectively communicate within those channels. Not that the channel drives the communication. There's a difference obviously between online and in person, but we can learn how to do that. but it's that trust that's going to lead to that effective communication. And with that, I am going to stop sharing, and I'm going to turn this back over to you, Emanuel. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Exactly what I expected and more. I wanted to make so many comments, but I think I would ask the audience, people who have attended, if they have any comments or any questions for our two guest speakers. In the meantime, with everyone's permission, I would like to read out loud and ask a question. Who here wouldn't like to know how to keep their current customers for years and years? Andrew, Rory, Joaquin, would you like to know? It's a well-known...
Absolutely.
Well, it's a well-known marketing fact that your best potential customers are your current customers. The acquisition cost of a new customer is high, and you cannot grow a business when there's a leaking bucket. Next month's webinar will be happening on Thursday, August 24th, 2023, starting 7 p.m. And it's called Learn 5 Keys to Having Customers That Will Stay With You for Years and Years. And our special guest will be Martha Chan. Martha is a success coach, a serial entrepreneur, and a consummate marketer who has owned 2 marketing agencies that served Fortune 500 companies and hundreds of small businesses for the past 30 plus years. She currently owns samedaywebsite.com and bestcoachforme.com, and I highly encourage everyone who has participated here to join that webinar as well. But since everyone's already subscribed to my newsletter, they'll get a reminder as soon as I'll send mine. I don't see any other questions or comments in the chat. I see something like this session was combined with real life examples. That's a comment from somebody from the audience. I believe that too. So thank you so much for being able to provide those real life examples, because many, it's hard to relate when you're not, you just simply give abstract examples, right? They can be interpreted as abstract examples. Any comments on the last comment? No?
Sorry, do you want us to comment upon that more, Emanuel? I mean, it is important because you can talk about the theory, it can be academic, you can talk about here's what we recommend, etc. But I think it provides authenticity if you're able to provide a real life example from your own personal experience, because then you know it works. Then you've tried it yourself, you've used it in action, and you've seen the success of it. So I think real life examples is absolutely necessary and important for a whole variety of different reasons. Did you want to add anything to that, Rory?
Oh, absolutely. Because actually, when I was with my team, my staff, in any coaching or mentoring opportunity that presented myself, I would use a story. I would use something that scarred me or something that I learned from when I'm trying to deliver my message. And what's funny is people have come back to me years later and said, I remember the story that you told me. And under the story is the moral and the message. They walk away remembering the funny little story or the marginally tragic little story, but which forces them, by memory by associative memory to remember what the message I was trying to deliver by telling them that. So I agree with you.
Excellent comments. Now, I've been blessed by working with Andrew for the past year, and I was already familiar with the concept, is it true, is it kind, and is it necessary? And it somehow became like a mantra to me, right? Not just in providing feedback and providing evaluation, but at an extent, as the proverb say, a gatekeeper for anything that comes out of my mouth. I I was conscious at first, but I've noticed that, well, I'm not sure. I've noticed that I wasn't as conscious as I was, but keep applying it. And not sure if that's one of the reasons why, but the life tends to be better. You'll be more happier when you apply this. I don't know, call it even a filter. That being said, thank you so much for being present here tonight. I hope you had a great a great time as well, as much as I did. Sorry for those who couldn't attend, but the good news is the recording will be available. And again, coming back to my newsletter, that's the main source where I'll be sharing all the information, the links to the upcoming webinars, the recordings, and the future plans. If you have anything else to add before we close this session, almost on time this time, and to end it in the spirit of today's webinar, after we'll be closing the session, you'll be asked for feedback. So what would a feedback for tonight's session will be from your end, including the technical?
Well, we did do our due diligence, Emanuel. I mean, we did last night meet up and do a dry run, etc. So I'm glad we did that, because who knows what else we might have run into today. But it is a learning session. It is a learning experience for us, because we haven't used sessions before. I like the tool, the software. So thank you for introducing it to us. And we now have so I hope you'll invite us again, because we have a lot more to talk about, right? We do an effective communication series. We just touch upon one small aspect. I mean, there's many other topics that we can discuss. But we'll be here early next time, because we now know how to get in and who to contact and how the whole thing works.
I'll be earlier.
So thank you for inviting us. And as Roy keeps pointing out, he got here earlier than me.
Thanks for inviting us, Manuel.
Thank you so much. Session is a new tool. It's constantly growing, and I believe you'll hear more and more, because they're up to something big. So be patient and with it. For those of you who want to try, I encourage you to try it right now. There's a lifetime deal, so essentially you can get it, get a premium version of this tool for like starting $50 up until $600, which allows you to have unlimited participants and unlimited moderators and so on, basically saving you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars down the road, compared to how much Zoom will cost, including other tools that this one tries to incorporate, such as Calendly or Eventbrite and so forth. Thank you again for your patience. Thank you again for the knowledge you have shared tonight. And I hope you'll be here again as guests.